Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing really well. This is a new little series of videos that I'm going to start doing, which is just sharing about where I'm coming from in terms of Whisper, in terms of why I'm involved, why I care about privacy, what privacy is all about, why we should all care about privacy, why maybe we need to reimagine how we think about a lot more fundamental things around freedom. What does that mean in the digital age? What does that mean when we're dealing with money? The whole world, our universe is going to, into this digital realm. But then there's this surveillance state that we're sort of constantly hearing that it's coming, and try and sort of stitch all of these parts together, really, guys, because there's so much happening in this world, and it feels quite sort of chaotic, quite fragmented, quite scary, quite out of our control. And the world is only getting more digitalized day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year, and the trajectory is more and more and more digital. It's not slowing down, it's not stopping. And with the rise of AI over the last few years, this brings a whole nother dimension, a whole nother layer of, I guess, concern, incredible possibility. So I'm trying to sort of, I guess, share my sort of personal thinkings and really share with you why, you need to maybe think about why, protecting your privacy is important. What does that mean in terms of your daily life? What tools can you use? How you can maybe opt out of the centralized systems that exist to make our lives convenient? Because obviously we've got to be realistic with all this. How do we make our lives convenient? It is ultimately the number one priority for all of us, because, we are busy. We're running around, whether we're at college, whether we're at school, whether at university, whether we're working jobs, whether we've got families, we've got bills to pay, rents to make, mortgages to pay, etc. So it's our lives are busy, and we can get sort of, I guess, wrapped up in the daily grind and forget about some of the foundational things that matter, such as privacy, such as our freedoms. Because really, until, I guess, we have those moments when it bites us in the arse, and suddenly what you thought was reality, or what freedoms that you thought you had, or the privacy you thought you had, what you thought might have existed, suddenly it's not. But at that point, potentially it's too late. Potentially the ship sailed. Potentially you're in hot water. Potentially it's had, ramifications on you. And the challenge is, of course, it's like one of those things where, like I said, we get wrapped up in our daily lives. We're busy. And until it actually affects you, often most of us don't actually take any action. So I guess the purpose of these videos is to start having these conversations around about technology, about privacy, about freedom, and try and connect the dots, if that sort of makes sense. I'm not really sure where the series is going to go, but, this is a bit of an experimental thing. Let's see what happens. If I get lots of likes, if I get lots of comments, maybe you can ask me questions. I'm not sure whether I'm going to be doing, talking about specific tools, things that I'm thinking about, and maybe you guys have got questions. So maybe that can help shape what I do, and maybe advice or share my views on certain things that I can give you. So that's really how I'm thinking about it right now. I'm writing these long form essays, as you know, which are quite heavy. It takes a lot of time to think about it, a lot of time to sort of write down ideas, challenge them, think about it. But it's quite sort of, I guess, theoretical, ethical, thinking about it from a high level perspective. So if you're into that type of thing, you can, if you, some people like watching videos, some people like listening to podcasts, some people like to read. So on the Substack, I'm publishing those essays or white papers or whatever you want to call them. And I do the read along that I've just started doing, which are quite hard work, believe it or not, actually having to read for, 50 minutes to an hour and a half non-stop. I try to do one take madly, just for sort of time convenience. But maybe, we can look to change that up. But I'm just publishing those out there for you to, to discover if you want. That's not really, it's long form content. It's quite heavy, but, it's something for you to maybe listen to while you wash your dishes or you mow your lawn or you're driving or whatever. It's probably more of a listen than a watch. But this is really just me, I guess, off the cuff and sharing about where I'm coming from. So just briefly on that note, so why Whisper? Why am I suddenly talking about privacy and freedoms. Yeah, and that's probably a good start. So let's kick it off. So I was always interested in politics and economics, and I studied that at university many moons ago. But what I didn't realize at the time was I was actually really studying about power and about money. Politics is not really about left and right. It's about power. It's about who has the power and the structures that exist. Yeah, a lot of sociology wrapped within that, and ethics and things like that. So that was fascinating, gave me an interesting grounding. And the economic side, obviously, that was interesting from a monetary side. I obviously then got into finance, as some of you will know, which again was interesting. But again, one of the frustrations I had was it was the sector that I was in was quite a cottage industry, shall we say. And I started as an entrepreneur, sort of discovering about sort of technology and sort of, I guess, pretty much when I started my own business back in 2009, 2010. It was interesting because I think my eyes sort of started to open up to realize that actually there's a huge world out there. Like I said earlier, technology is only going to accelerate, and there's an opportunity to reach a lot more people than just in my local neighborhood, for example. So I started thinking about things. I came across Bitcoin in 2012. And no, I didn't buy any at that point, stupidly, of course. But as many of you will know, that it takes several touch points before we all pull the trigger on doing something. So I can cover that another day. So, but it was interesting because it got me thinking about how, for example, the mortgage industry could be reimagined with blockchain technology, which I still think it certainly can be and it will be. But I think that's a really interesting area that is ripe for the taking in terms of removing the need for middlemen and intermediaries and executing the transactions at such a faster speed and much more efficiency. So that's really interesting. I was probably way ahead of the curve in terms of my thinking there. And then I started my first startup alongside my financial services business. That was a great learning curve back in, I think it was 2014 it started, 2015, something like that. I can't remember exactly. But as I sort of progressed and started to learn more about technology, Bitcoin, which is all about decentralized money, separating state from money, all about freedom, about having control of your money, money that's not manipulated by outside forces such as state interference. I started realizing that actually, and it started teaching me that there was so much manipulation within the financial services sector, as in money, as in the fiat system. And I guess it sort of starts to open your eyes up. You go down the rabbit hole of, okay, well, what does money mean? Who, if money can be printed at will, who's actually in control of money? What does that mean in terms of your freedom to have your money being debased? How can the value of my money be reduced by some outside factors or outside influence by just the whim of a centralized government that decides that they need to print more money and they want to throw more money into wars and all the rest of it? It got me thinking and going down that rabbit hole of money. What is money? How money works? How we can have money which is free from outside manipulation that can't be printed. There's a finite supply. What does it mean in terms of inflation and deflation, and what does that look like? Do we have to live in a inflationary world just because we're told that a 2% inflation rate is the norm, and is start thinking about what Austrian economics actually offers as an alternative to Keynesianism, and obviously to the existing fiat system. So on that path, as I was doing my startup, we started a software company, and started building not just for clients but also products. One of which was Ava Mind, which was a mental health or therapeutic assistant app. One of the things we suddenly realized quite quickly was this concern around privacy, this concern around sort of entering your data and talking to an AI versus a human being. And equally, even when speaking to a human being, the absolute imperative for privacy and confidentiality. And we're working a lot with the therapists, engaging with them as we're building and working with them, because we there was a clear, we always believed there was a need, and we still do. There's a need for both technology as well as in-person support, and something that professional face-to-face support can never be replaced. I think human contact is incredibly powerful and incredibly important as we become more digitalized. There was that, but we knew the privacy side was an obvious, I guess, area that we needed to address. And this was aligning with my personal thinkings and thoughts around smaller government. We'd just gone through COVID with lockdowns and things like that, and we could see the manipulation of money accelerating, printing of money, more and more controls by the state, and I guess more and more overreach in terms of our digital lives, because it's still, before our lives became very digitalized, it was relatively easy to have privacy, and you shut your door and you can have private conversations. But of course, as the world becomes more digital, as there are more, I guess, reasons for governments to try and have overreach, pandemics, etc., and whether they want to lockdowns, shutdowns, all the rest of it, the surveillance state just becomes more and more, so your privacy starts being eroded. So this was combining with us thinking deeply about how AI becomes a bit more private. Obviously you have encryption, but that has limitations, and it got us to really accelerate our thinking around about, okay, what is the ultimate solution? It might not exist right now, but what can we do? How do we do it? So it got us thinking really about that side of things, and we did a lot of innovation. And kind of long story short, we developed on-device AI, which we have now used those learnings and technologies to launch Whisper, which is a private on-device AI. So without banging on about Whisper specifically, I think the point for this video for now is just, as AI is accelerating, as all these technologies are accelerating, whether we've got CBDC, centralized digital currencies coming along, and we have stable coins, which are variations of effectively of that. They are digital currencies, programmatic money, basically money that can be monitored and controlled. We have the new laws, I can't remember specifically, that's coming in the 1st of January 2026, certainly in the European Union and the UK, where everything's being monitored in terms of transactions within the crypto space. If you're on exchanges, every transaction is going to be recorded and directly fed to the HMRC. It's just a real, and with that, of course, they'll have AI monitoring, and they'll have this and that, and as we know, social media is monitored, and your messages are monitored, your phone could be subpoenaed. Everything is going to be recorded and potentially used against you. Now, for most people, it won't be. But again, it's not until it bites you in the arse that you suddenly go, oh, actually, I am worried about my privacy now. So it's thinking about, how do we use privacy? Why is even privacy important? I mean, maybe that's worth a video in its own right, because a lot of people think, well, I've got nothing to hide. Why am I worried about my privacy if it makes my life convenient? I think the danger is when there are systems and processes and technologies that are created. We might trust the government today, we might trust the institutions of today, but what does that institution, what does that government look like in 50 years, 100 years, if that technology exists? It's always a fact that control by the institutions, the institution of government, shall we say, has a tendency to creep and to capture more power, to take a little bit more, by the very nature of that organism that exists. So we have to be very mindful of what we allow when we make our votes in democracies. Not everyone lives in a free society, so they don't have agency. We could argue about how valuable that agency is, how much of an impact it makes. Yes, I get that. But in the meantime, we also have agency to decide what digital tools we use, what VPNs we use, what money we use, how we look after that money, how we think about using AI in safe ways that isn't potentially abusive or manipulative or designed to control us in any way. So I think particularly with AI, it's become more prevalent. In the 2010s, we had the rise of social media and we saw the consequences of that. We allowed big tech to control that, harvest our information, harvest our behaviors and monetize us. And ultimately, it's quite an abusive relationship. Yeah, what we thought was free. Again, I go back to the point of convenience, zero barrier to entry. But what we forget is that we're then the commodity, we're then being harvested, we're then the product. Let's start exploring how we can protect ourselves and how we can start thinking about how this aligns with our freedoms and why it matters, because I think that's important, particularly as we become more digitalized. But guys, yeah, that was a bit of a ramble. So I hope that was okay. But listen, yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know what your thoughts are, like I said earlier. And don't forget, hit that like, subscribe, do all those incredible things. I really appreciate it. And we'll see where this goes. Take care. All right.